Hey, you guys. So today we're going to talk about the three major types of timeline walkers. And before I get into that, I just want to say one of the things that you're probably going to hear me talk about a lot on this channel is the different understandings of changing and shifting your timelines, because it is something that, I've heavily been made to understand by spirit that we can do. And I just want to, for anybody out there who's wanting to go through the process of shifting their timeline or ascending beyond certain timelines in their life, to give them my understanding of that information in the hopes that it'll help them. But moving on, I want to discuss with you the three different major timeline walkers. And the first thing you should know is that you can be a mix of more than one of these. You may not exist in a highlighted extreme understanding of just one. So understand that more than one of these can apply to you. We're going to start with the pivoter. And the reason we're going to start with this one is because I can relate to it the most. The pivoter is a timeline walker who is able to be in a situation, and when it does not work out the way that they want it, they're able to change and shift almost immediately. It's like their mind completely is like, okay, well, this doesn't work out. I'm going to move on to this. They literally have plan A to Z. And then if plan A to Z don't work out, they got A1 to Z1. So like that is the type of timeline walker that the pivoter is. So it's always ready. It's always prepared. It's never in this understanding of like, I'm just going to stay still if this thing doesn't work, or I'm just going to, really rest or sit in sadness if the plan that I had set isn't coming together the way I want it to. And this type of timeline walker often deals with a lot of anxiety. Usually it's high functioning anxiety, because they are so good at pivoting. They're so good at changing to something else that they don't even have time to just be in a frazzled state and ball up, curl up in a ball and feel anxious or frustrated. They hide from their frustrations or their anxieties through pivoting towards something else. And this is not a bad thing. At the end of the day, the type of timeline walker you kind of want to become is a pivoter, because a pivoter doesn't limit themselves, because a pivoter doesn't see one situation as the end all, be all of things. And even though that sounds amazing, the pivoter also has a tendency to hide from their own emotional healing and recovery through moving towards something else. They can never just sit still. They can never just be still. They have to get up and move or do something or go to something else. Because if they sit still long enough, all of the what they may deem failure, all the failures of, or the sadness or the depression or the defeatedness of those situations that didn't work out would catch up with them. And because they don't want that to happen, and they may not completely know consciously, but because they don't want that to happen, they have to keep moving. They have to keep jumping timelines. And so that's the pivoter. The next type of timeline walker that I want to talk about is the fixator. Now, the fixator is, I think, in my opinion, it's the most dangerous sort of timeline walker, because they fixate so heavily on things turning out in one specific way that they refuse to accept that there's any other understanding. This means that, let's say, for instance, they lose their job, then they fall apart, and they refuse to get back up, or they refuse to see that there is any possible good understanding in it, or they try to fight to stay in this timeline. They try to fight to keep this same position, even though the reason that certain things in this timeline might not be working out is because spirit wants you to pivot, or spirit wants you to change, and they're afraid of that change. I've seen I've experienced a lot of understandings of this type of timeline walker. Often, because they feel like their world or their life is over because of the situation not working out the way they wanted to, unaliving themselves. They're so consumed by this timeline being the timeline that must work that they can't imagine or think into any other understanding. And so this is why, to me, being a fixator is the most dangerous type of timeline. It's important to learn to pivot. It's important to learn to, to accept that maybe there are other opportunities that you need to move towards and that you're going to be okay. This is not an understanding of just one way for you to be successful. Our life is multifaceted. Our ability is multifaceted. You have so much potential. And a lot of times, if something doesn't work out in a specific way, it could be that Spirit is wanting you to grow another extension of yourself, wanting you to step into another extension to have even more success or to reach greater heights. And also, it could be that the timeline that you're so fixated on has nothing more to offer you. So that is the fixator. I mean, I will tell you the upside of the fixator. Like it's this is why I said it's not that you don't exist in some of this energy, because when you really know that a timeline is for you, and it's not saying that you're like, if this doesn't work out, everything is over. That's not the understanding. But sometimes you get to a point where you pivot enough to you pivot and get to the timeline that you want, and you ground it. You begin to ground that timeline into the world for yourself. So it is a little bit of fixating, but it's not so much. It's more the understanding of like, well, I really strongly am investing energy in this timeline, but your mind isn't saying, if this timeline doesn't work out, then everything is over. You're saying, I want so strongly for this timeline to work out, but I accept that maybe I don't know everything, and maybe there are other ways that Spirit wants me to exist in this world that I'm not seeing yet. But I'm not saying that this is the end all be all for me if it does not work. So there is a balanced understanding of possibly stepping into or staying in that fixator energy. But the reversed understanding really is about fixating so much on a specific version of your life that you refuse to allow or see anything else. And not even though I spoke about, the fact that sometimes people unalive themselves based off being a type of that fixator personality, this also can be the other understanding of harming others or harming the environment or causing devastation to the world around you because you feel like things aren't happening the way you want to in the timeline understanding that you want. So that is the fixator. The next one that I want to talk to you about, or the last one I want to talk to you about, is the follower. And the follower sounds like exactly what it is. It's somebody who refuses to take accountability for their own journey. They want everybody to lead them in their timeline. They don't choose timelines for themselves, or they feel anxious and scared about choosing timelines for themselves. So they allow others to lead them. There are a lot of people that exist this way. A lot of people that exist in the understanding of, I am afraid to make my own choice, so I'm going to allow other people to lead me. And this way, it's not my fault, And it may not be completely consciously that they're saying it's not my fault, but in some sense, it's easier to just put that understanding on somebody else. If this person leads me wrong, well, how dare they? Like they should do better. But you really must learn to lead and walk your own life. You must learn to step into timelines for yourself so that you can really have more emotional fulfillment and balance, because somebody could literally lead you off a cliff if you're always following them. And a lot of times, people have their own agendas when it comes to leading someone. So it's best to learn to pick and step into timelines for yourself. And that's again why the pivoter energy is not a bad thing, but it does have its downside. You must be able to learn to rest. I think that the best energy to be in is somewhat a pivoter, but at the same time, be ready to ground in the timeline that you want for yourself and the best understanding when it feels right. And with the follower, I can't really say that I agree too much with this timeline, this type of timeline walker, but I'm also just a rebellious person. But have I always been this way? Probably, except for the understandings of when I was a kid, where I guess had to have an adult lead my life in some sense. But even then, I've been told stories about myself that just say I was always a rebellious individual who didn't want to listen. Or my mom actually used to say a lot, because Samantha, my name means listen, or listener of God. She said, for somebody whose name means listen, you sure don't know how to. So I cannot say that I have ever really been a follower energy. But I think that depending on where you are in your spiritual journey, it might be good to have some assistance, or have someone who can teach you or lead you. That's where I can say I followed. So, okay, the way that I've been a follower is through books, probably. I have been led to different understandings, and created them or made them part of myself through my reading, because I've always been a very avid reader. When I was a child, of course, it was possibly more fantasy, and as I grew older, it became more about greater perspective on things, and healing and other stuff like that. So my following understanding has been mainly come from books. And even with that being said, especially where I am now in my life, I always read in a way that's like, well, this resonates, and I leave other stuff behind. So if you are going to really exist in a more following energy, I mean, we all have to follow something, I guess. We all have to follow to some extent. But at the same time, it's not a timeline walker that I would say is the one that I like the most. It's just that, to some extent, you may need help and assistance to walk your journey. But at some point, you have to get to a point where you are leading your own life. You're leading your own life from a human perspective. Yes, again, the spirit or God may be what is leading you truly, but in your own human understanding, what you desire for yourself, how you want to move, you're not allowing some other human person to supersede that. So that's what I think about the follower understanding. But yes, like, those are the three different timeline walkers. You have the pivoter, the fixator, and the follower. Take the time and be honest with yourself about which one you are, and see, do you exist in the light version of that or the shadow version of that? Do you need to possibly balance out or fix some understandings pertaining to that? What way do you need to recalibrate when it comes to you being a timeline walker? Because we all are. We're all walking through timelines every day. But that's a topic for another day. I hope this message resonated with you. And if it doesn't, I hope you find what does.